Welcome to Summer School 2021. Today I'd like to show you some of the resources that you'll be using, and I'd like to go over the scope and sequencing, the plan of the course. So here you can see our Google Classroom, and this will be your primary interface with me each and every day. You can see that on the Google Classroom there is a class link, a Meet link that will be joining each other through Google Meets each day. So let's take a look at some of the online resources. I have a welcome letter for you. You can always read that on your own time. Here's the course outline, and I think we should look at that together. So as you know, it's 5 credits. It is Social 30-1. Here's just a cut and paste of the pedagogy, the scope and sequencing, the rationale from Alberta Ed, including the related issues being outlined. What you'll probably want to take specific attention to, though, is what are we doing each day? So I have each day outlined here for you generally, and this will be key because on some days we definitely do have exams. We also have the diploma days mentioned, and as you probably know, the diplomas in August will be optional. If you are opting to write these diplomas, please contact me by email straight away, and there's my email, and there's the email of our district principal that's in charge of summer school, Mrs. Karen Algert. So that's just a quick overview of the course, but what we really have for you, the key resource for the entire year, even more important than the textbook. So even more important than the textbook is this resource called the online resource. So this is the key resource. It includes all lessons, includes all assessment breakdown, it includes the scope, the sequencing. It has assessment exemplars. So if you need to know, what should this look like? There'll be examples there. And I've taken some notes for you. So let's go through this together. And it's always going to be there waiting for you on Google Classroom to go and revisit. That's us celebrating, the end of social studies at the end of July. So you're pretty excited about that. Again, we have the scope and sequencing, but this time it has more detail. What you'll see here is that there'll be some reference to textbook chapters. The textbook is just meant to be an initial taste for the course. It gives you an overview. The textbook is not is not going to be the path to having a sound and specific or a precise understanding. So it has a very generalized delivery of the course content. So it's a good start. That's why I recommend that if students have the opportunity to skim through it, but we won't be following the scope and sequencing of the textbook. We'll be maneuvering our way through the textbook more thematically than in the order that they have it. But it definitely does give you something that's not on screen to look at times. You can see that on July 2nd, we'll have our introduction to the course. Lessons 1 and 2. And in addition to the reference to the textbook, I also have what I call Williams videos. And Jennifer Williams is a teacher in Airdrie, and she has put all of her lectures on YouTube. And what she does is she teaches a reverse classroom where her students have for homework each night, they need to watch the lectures. And then in class, now that the students already have that content, she can revisit those lectures and then do some work with them. I have those connected videos here as a second journey through the curriculum for you. So the first journey is through the textbook, and the second journey for you would be to preload the content by looking at the Williams videos. And when you watch the Williams videos, I'll just bring one up. You'll see, maybe you've used them before, but you'll see at the beginning of the video, she'll have some guiding questions, and then at the end of the video, she has the answers. So I would suggest to you that the Williams video is another good exposure, a generalized exposure to the content. So the first step might be skimming through the textbook. The second step is looking through these Williams videos. And then you might be saying, okay, what do we do after that? Well, after that, I also have a YouTube channel, and I've recorded my lectures. So each day we're going to be checking in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and when we check in with Google Meet at 8 in the morning, I will be outlining the objectives of the day. So I'll say, at the end of today's class, you should be able to do this, this, and this. And in order to do that, these are the resources that we have. And I'll be mentioning the resources that perhaps you've already looked at, like the textbook or the Williams videos. And then I'll be mentioning the new resources that you should be adding to it, like my recorded YouTube videos. What we'll also be doing each day is I'll be checking back in with you at 10:30 to see if you have any questions, have any questions popped up in between when we leave each other at 8 and 10:30. And then we'll join each other live at 12:30. And when we gather live at 12:30, I will, in a live Google Meet, I will revisit the core concepts of the day. So by the time I'm reteaching and revisiting the core concepts, the idea is that you've already seen them in the textbook perhaps. You've already seen them in the Williams videos. You've already seen them in my videos. I've already shown you my notes and my online lessons. So by the time I'm teaching you it, it'll be perhaps the 6th time that you've explored some of these concepts. And I would argue that by the time we really visit it together, you'll already be at that sound and specific level of understanding, or we'll be able to more surgically get you there. We'll be able to understand what is it that you get and what is it that you don't get. Built into our timetable each day will be opportunities for us to do a lot of question and answer. If we were in person, I'd be walking around our classroom and I could just, check in with you and say, hey, how are you understanding things? And one thing I do need to mention is that we are live from 8 a.m. till 3 o'clock every day, and that means that if you ever need help, you can always send out an email to me asking for assistance. But one of the key things I want to mention is that at 8 a.m. every morning when we meet, the first thing before I say these are the new objectives of today, I want to say, you've been studying, you've been reviewing. Are there any concepts to date that remain unclear to you? And this may take us 10 minutes. This may take us a half an hour some days. But it's important to revisit the areas that we've already examined before we add new stuff. If we're adding new content on confusion, we're only going to have more confusion. So at the beginning of every day, I want to make sure that we have time built into our timetable to do some general question and answer. And that'll be a part of that 8 a.m. meet. So again, at 8 a.m. we'll meet. I'll say, are there any questions questions that need to be answered? We'll go through those, and then I'll outline the objectives of the day. And then, maybe 8:15, maybe 8:30, maybe 9 o'clock. But at that point, I'll turn you loose for a little bit to work on some assignments, looking at some of my pre-recorded lessons and lectures. And then we'll come back at 10:30 and see if there's any confusion that has popped up. And then I'll give you some stuff to work on until lunchtime. And then at the end of lunch at 12:30, we'll come back and then we'll look at it live. And I think that in repetition, there'll be more opportunity for understanding. So going back to our scope and sequencing, as you can see, July 2nd, we have lessons 1 and 2. And these are the assigned videos and stuff that you could preview. And you can see that is for each day. Now, when I go down to lessons 1 and 2, because it said it had lessons 1 and 2, we can click on the online lesson. And what I have here for you are the notes. So I already have provided for you some notes. So these are the objectives of the lesson, and I have some things for you to read through. I might even have some sample multiple choice that you can work on. This should give us some opportunity to test your understanding and see what you need me to revisit. So the online lessons are going to be key for you to be exposed to the content of the course, and for you to go from generalized to sound and specific all the way up to precise and insightful understanding of these concepts. And as you can see, included in these lessons, there'll be some very short videos. Anything in red or anything in pink these are the essential building blocks of the course. And I might even put little notes like very good. And I'll even put a time. This is a 7-minute video. It's very good. It's going to establish who Hobbes is. If you've watched it before I teach you about Hobbes, then when I teach you about Hobbes, it'll be much more clear for you. So this is my online resource, my online textbook, it gives you some stuff to actually put some kind of relevance into the content of the course. And the nice thing about having it all within that online resource is that you can journey your way through the content asynchronously. Asynchronously meaning that you can work ahead or you can catch up. Maybe there's a Friday that you're not available, but you can, get ahead before you're going to be away on that Friday, or after that Friday you can catch up with us. So all the resources that you need are in this online resource. This online resource really makes the textbook seem quite simple. And I'm not pumping my tires too much here, I hope, but it takes what is generally introduced in the textbook. It takes what is somewhat generally introduced through the Williams videos, and it does a very comprehensive explanation or exploration of it. So that's lesson 1, Introduction to Ideologies. But when you're looking at lesson 1, you're probably going to want to know what are the objectives here. And that's why at the beginning of each day at 8 a.m., after I do the question and answer, I'm going to say, in lesson 1, these are the things I want you to look for. Good news, I also have pre-recorded videos of me going through these lessons with you. So if you're somebody that looks at the online lesson and you're like, you know what, I'm struggling with this, I feel like I'm on my own. This is a recorded video from me from last summer going through the lesson with my students, explaining it to them. So another way to explore the content is through our online lessons. And our online lessons have related lectures to them as well. Back to the scope and sequencing. July 2nd, again, we have an introduction to the course. That's chapters 1 and 2 of the textbook. That's a look into ideologies, a look into individualism versus collectivism. And then you have the weekend. And then we come back on Monday the 5th. And by Monday the 5th, we're on to chapter 4. And chapter 4 is about responses to classic liberalism, mostly in an economic sense. This is where we look at the flaws of capitalism and we look at the growth of some of the rejections or the attempts to reform capitalism. So this is where we look at utopian socialism and communism and other ideologies. On the 6th, we'll get into the evolution of classic liberalism into modern liberalism as we venture through progressivism and the Great Depression. By the 7th and the 8th, we will be looking at what I would call neoliberal economics. We'll look at Friedman and Thatcher and Reagan, and this will give us an opportunity to really explore, what elements of the economy warrant government intervention. So that will take us to the end of the first full week of the course, but the following Monday, we should be ready to look at some major assessment. So in this scope and sequencing, you can see that the major assessment's in red. So these are important days that are a little less flexible. Let's say that something comes up, though, and you're not available on July 9th or July 13th or July 14th, then I'd really appreciate an email and just say, Mr. McBride, my family, we're doing this on the 13th. Is there a different date that I can be assessed? And I'm going to be pretty flexible, especially if you give me a heads up. So make sure you give me a heads up. But these dates are meant to be the set dates for these exams. So we have an A1, we have an A2, but before I give you an A1 exam, before I give you an A2 exam, I'm going to assume that you maybe don't remember how to do the writing assignments, or maybe you've never done them. So we will have some teachable moments, and as you'll see in a moment, there's some exemplars in this document for you, so that you can go and look at and say, what are they meant to look like? We'll have some multiple choice that you'll do online, and there's going to be the end of that first unit, the economic unit. The first unit, the economic unit, has some overlap with the political unit, the second unit of the year, and that's why some of these dates begin to kind of become a little crooked. Here we go, the 19th, and then we have the 13th, and we have the 12th and the 9th, because we do begin to learn about some politics. We look at chapter 5 of the textbook, we look at the case studies of authoritarianism before we finish up the first unit of the year, because when we study the USSR, when we study Nazi Germany, we're studying them politically and economically, and I don't want to study them twice. So there will be some dates in here that you can see that kind of appear to be out of sequence. And again, each one of these lessons, if you go down, there's a full, so lesson 13, for example, there's the Google lesson, and here's the additional reading. There's a little article that I have for you there, and here's a video of me teaching it. So each one of these lessons has a lot of further elaboration down below. So we take you through the political unit, and we get into democracy, chapters 10 and 11 of the textbook, and then we get into citizenship. And for all intents and purposes, that's the majority of the year. So we have our second midterm there on the 23rd and 26th. Then we come back from that and we have one final little mini unit on foreign policy. We look at Cold War, we look at contemporary world, and then we're into what I would say the year-end exams. In the year-end exams, we have some year-long themes, right? Some themes that aren't just political, they're not just economic, they're not just foreign, they're not just domestic policy. They kind of fit into the entire course, and that's why we have this third major exam. And we'll also have some field tests. So I'd like to clarify, what do I mean by a field test? We're not getting Alberta Ed's field tested questions for a future diploma exam, but the reality is I have a lot of exams. I have a lot of exams that, I could pick, do I want to use this version of the test or this version? And I don't want to be the teacher that doesn't give you an opportunity to show me how much you know. So at the end of the course, often, almost always, my students understand the course better than they did earlier, even a couple weeks earlier. So we had the economic test on the 9th and the 14th. 2 weeks later, you might really understand economics now. And you're like, man, I wish I could redo that test. Well, we have some built-in redos at the end. I've seen students' marks jump by 5, 10, 15, 20%. I'm not just making up these numbers. Even this week, teaching my current 30s, I saw a student go from 63 to an 80, 17% because of one exam. Just because of one of these field test exams. She scored a 94, and before that she was struggling to get above 50 on these exams. So it isn't without precedent that students may peak right at the end of the year. This is where it's kind of like watching a movie, and throughout the movie you're like, man, I really don't understand what's going on. And then at the end of the movie, just before the end, you're like, oh man, I totally get it now. That's kind of how Socials 30 works often. So I want to give you lots of opportunity at the end to show me that you get it. And if you get it at the end, then I go back and I change some marks. So we'll give you these field tests. These are opportunities to improve, but it would never lower your mark. So if we write a field test and you end up scoring lower than you did before, I'm not going to go back and penalize you for that. That's inappropriate. But what I will do is, if you score higher, I'll just go back and I'll update the mark, because I'm having more clarity in the assessment. I better understand your ability in the course. We also have something called term projects, and that sounds a lot more intimidating than it is, and I'll probably record another one of these to talk to you about term projects. There's 4 things you'll be doing for me, and it represents half of your classwork mark. Most students get 100% in it, so it doesn't have to be something that becomes a monster that you fear. By doing the term projects, it will make you score higher on the assignments. So please don't wait until the end of the course to do the term projects. Most students do, but it'd be more helpful if you work on them during the term of the course. So those are the blue dates. These are the optional diploma dates. Again, we need to know right away, because we need to order these things. We need to tell Alberta Ed we need an exam here at WRPS. Otherwise, we won't have one. And then where are you going to write? So we need you to tell us, at the beginning of July, if your intention is to write the diploma exam. So again, this is just an overview, a quick overview with the links to the Williams videos. And then if you go down here, these are longer links to my Google lessons, to my YouTube videos. There's even my recorded Google Meets from last summer school. That's probably a lot of dead air when I'm asking my students, hey, do you have any questions? And they don't. Or I had one student that asked a lot of great questions, but they might not be your questions. So that's probably just more of a tertiary resource, something to use if you're absolutely looking to change it up. So if you go down here all the way through all of those dates, the exams are in red again, as you can see. You get to the end, and now we have, from our textbook, these are the chapter questions. So if you're working on the textbook and you want it to guide your way through, here's the questions. These are the things you need to be pulling from the textbook. But you might be saying, you know what, Mr. McBride, I didn't come get a textbook. Or I live out of town. I can't come get a textbook. Well, here's the answer key. So what I would say is the answer key is a fantastic review of each chapter. These are the important things from the chapter. So if you don't have time to read the textbook or skim through the textbook, or if you don't have a textbook to look through, I would say these are great review notes to look at. This is a summary of the textbook. This is the first chapter of the textbook reduced down to 4 pages. So I have that here for you for each chapter. Definitely it would be helpful to be previewing the chapters that are associated with what I'm teaching in advance, right? So if at 12:30 on a given Tuesday, I'm going to be talking about chapter 4, I think that's actually Monday, right? So Monday the 5th, is it? I'm going to be teaching chapter 4. It might be good to have previewed that chapter. Again, you could look at the key so that you can be pre-exposed to some of the terms. So it won't be the first time that you've heard of Chartism, or it's not the first time that you've heard of the word utopia. And then what I'm saying isn't moving too quickly, right? Because sometimes I get excited and I talk real fast, and people are silly like that. So I've got the textbook stuff there, but you know what? I really like to do things comprehensively. So I have what I would say other resources. And here's a document with links to guides to the course. So you click on that, and what do we have here? We have notes. We have lots of extra notes for you. So if you need some extra notes, there are some extra notes for you. 56 pages of extra notes. Lots of cartoons, right? So if you've never analyzed a cartoon and you need some practice with that, there's lots of cartoons in there. Some hints about essay writing, some hints about what to do with quizzes, and some summaries of units and some notes. Here's a course summary. So here's all the key notes that a student has typed up about economics and politics. And these are the core outcomes that you're meant to have. So there's another summary of the course there for you. Here's some writing guides. How do you do in A1? How do you do in A2? I have recorded videos for them, but I also have recorded documents. So that can be helpful. We have some multiple choice review. We have some practice questions with answers. We have me going through the practice questions, struggling with them live. So I didn't have the key out, but I ended up, because my 30s last summer, they weren't allowed to come in and they were working online, and many of them struggled on multiple choice. So early on, I understood that they needed more help in that area. So how can I give them that help? We needed to do some questions together. So I recorded myself struggling through the questions so they can see some of the skill involved in breaking questions down. Because there is an art, there is a science, there is a skill to, performing well on a test. And part of it is studying, obviously. You need to know the content. You need to know the big rocks, the words. But there's also a way to decipher, to unpack the question. And by going through the test questions with me, some of that will be unleashed for you. And there's some comprehensive reviews as well. There's the term project stuff that I'll come back to. There's some additional notes. So if you're a student that likes to have printed notes up, and you're like, okay, what is it about democracy that I need? Well, here's some notes for you. Here's some notes on democracy. And then there's our typical day. So a typical day, somewhat subject to change, in the sense that if it is an exam day, this timeline, these actual, maybe we meet at 8 a.m. and I'd say, okay, before we write the test, do you have any questions? And if it's a written exam, maybe I'd go over, this is how you do an A1 again, because we do have a lot of time together every day. So we have a luxury of time. So before we get to the assessment, I'd want to make sure you're ready for it. but at some point we jump into the assessment. And there's my email. Again, I want you to be able to reach out and ask for help anytime that you need it. So I will make another one of these where I talk about the term projects. And you know what? Let's just do the term projects now. So talking about term projects, there's 4 term projects. One term project is a cast of characters. And I'm going to go ahead and put a sample right here for you. And when I put a sample here for you, what you could do is you could open it up and do a save as, save it as your name, and then simply add to it. Make it better, you'll get 100%. So I'm going to put a cast of characters up there that somebody already has 100%. So what I'd like you to do is be able to see a list, and these are the important people of the course, but I think you can add to it. I think that each day as we visit certain names, look at the list and say, is Reagan on that list? Is Thatcher on the list already? If not, add them to the list. So I'm going to have the cast of characters there for you, and cast of characters, and that's one of the key ones that'll help you out. Cast of characters will help you out a lot with the multiple choice, because often in multiple choice we'll have questions that are like, from the perspective of Adam Smith, which of the following government actions would be least beneficial during a time of, economic depression? And in order to answer that, you need to say, well, what is Adam Smith like? What are his values and assumptions? So cast of characters will help you with multiple choice. It'll help you also with your writing because you can be more specific. Another thing that you're going to have is a glossary of key terms. And I'm just going to put in one or more of the samples of glossary key terms that my students have already made. And again, vocabulary is key to understanding multiple choice. So if you understand the key terms, then you can get beyond just the unpacking of the question to the actual, finding the answer. So the glossary of key terms is another term project. So we have cast of characters, glossary of key terms. Another one is like basically evaluation of liberalism. And I spelled evaluation wrong, and you're making fun of me, and that's okay, because everything's good now. So evaluation of liberalism, and what we're going to do there is take the 2 branches of liberalism, the political, which is democracy, and the economic, which is capitalism, and throughout the course, because that is the course, the course is about liberalism. It says ideologies, but really we focus on liberalism as the main one. Throughout the course, I want you to say, why would somebody support capitalism? Why would somebody not support it? What's the arguments? What are the arguments? What's the evidence that they've used? And the same thing with democracy. What is it about democracy they like, argument-wise, evidence-wise, and what about democracy would they not like? And as you work on that term project, you're really working on your essays, because now you're going to have argumentation and evidence that you can use in your essays. Speaking of essays, we'll have one final term project, and that's the one that's listed above. I'm going to reorder these so that it makes better sense. It's kind of clunky as it is. And what it does is it looks at all of the old diploma exams, all the old essay prompts, and I have a student's work from the past that has already deciphered, all of them up to 2019, and then there's 3 that haven't been done. So I've kind of set the exemplar with, what would it be, like 17 or so examples, and then it's like, now that you have seen what we're meant to do to break down a source, can you do these last 3? And that's the 4th term project. Cast of characters, glossary of key terms, some kind of like deciphering evaluation of liberalism, what's good, what's not good about it, and finally breaking sources down so we can see this idea of what does an ideal government look like. All right, so that's an introduction to the course. I'm going to be posting this on YouTube, and I'm going to be putting a link on our Google Classroom. And probably the first thing I'm going to ask you on the second is, how many of you watched the introductory YouTube video? And I'm hoping that you've watched it. All right, so we will talk live soon, but I'm pretty excited about the summer. So I didn't want to wait until the second to talk to you. Hence the reason why we're talking now. See you soon.